cars, and cars are important, but should Dodge be able to sell a vehicle that's going 80 miles an hour, that's marketed as going 80 miles an hour through a city and tearing up the road, even if underneath the bottom it says, done on a closed course? Does this potentially open up the space of how automobile companies communicate and sell their products? And we also know, because there's studies that have come out, including one from Australia, that the way that automobiles are manufactured, are marketed, have a very direct impact on how people use them. The second example is looking at the cigarette companies and the major lawsuits that were brought against them for no shortage of reasons. But are there other ways of thinking about taking significant legal action against some of the worst actors, not only now, but potentially thinking about the futures of our cities that are having very real public health or other impacts on our cities, and simply using this as another tool outside of policy and regulation to try to change behavior and start to win or reshape what the future could look like? We see regulation in places like Europe that are requiring auto manufacturers to install speed limiters, that are actually building smaller trucks that are safer, not just for pedestrians and those around. How can we lean on regulation to start to push for changes in Detroit and other in Silicon Valley that will require that any vehicle that enters into our cities will be safe, and safe by design, not after the fact and not requiring lawsuits, but that when they're produced off the line, that these markets are large enough. And so we're thinking about what might a place like New York and California do together to try to draw attention, because the markets here are large enough to shift either the design or the size or the way that vehicles are produced. It's obviously a very long fight, but how can we steal that inspiration? Again, we're all in the space of stealing ideas from each other. And I would say also, and again, this is not a sort of a high-minded idea, but how are we involved in the ethics around all of these tools that are playing out in our city? Again, predictive analytics, AI, self-driving cars. Who from our cities is at the table deciding whether that car should turn left into a brick wall and kill the driver, or turn right into a playground and kill children? Someone is making that decision, and it's not only not us, but it's not even the leaders in our city who are at the table. We may be there when the companies come in and start to experiment and put some requirements on it. But how do we put our cities and their needs at the center of these decisions about what's going to come and really be a tidal wave on top of all of the challenges that we've already seen so far? So my question and provocation to this group is, if we acknowledge, and it's a very hard acknowledgement, that we've lost the last war. We lost to GM, we lost to Ford, we lost to the freedom of movement, drive humans progress. We lost to the fact that 80% of the spending in our country is focused on highways versus the 20% towards public transit. We lost to all the highways and the highway expansion. These are wars that we are not going to win today. So my question to all of us is, how can we win the next 100 years? What are the pieces that are most important in your community? What are the tools that you need? What are the ways that we stand together in fighting, whether it's traveling to Rome to be part of the ethics conversation about the future of AI, of going up to Detroit, of being in Washington, of being in the capital of wherever you're from, and starting to demand a new set of principles and guidance moving forward. It doesn't mean we should ever stop fighting for safe streets. It doesn't mean we should ever stop fighting for better options. It doesn't mean that on that intersection where my grandmother couldn't cross, that we have a shared responsibility to fight to make it better. But now, really, I think is more than ever is this opportunity. We're on the precipice for such huge fundamental change. And if we simply are thinking about how we take what we learned from First Avenue and bring it to Third Avenue 20 years later, without even acknowledging the changes that have taken place over that 20-year period, but we're not starting to build future forward. And again, there's no way to be future-proof. I don't want to suggest being naive, nor do I want any of us to think that what we're going to do now is going to help to protect and project everything that's happening in the future. But we have to be focused on those next 100 years. So this is an idea that I think we should continue to discuss together. I know with Gil and others who are really on the forefront of this, These should be sort of larger, robust conversations, and really to think in your community about not just what we need today, but how might we start to play with these future tools, not only how they benefit us, but how we can help to protect. So that's what I wanted to bring to this esteemed group together. And I'm really excited for your questions and ideas. What do you think is working? What should we be thinking about? Have we not lost the last 100 years? Is there still an opportunity to win? But yeah, let's talk about it. So Gil, I'll turn it back to you.
Danny, thank you very, very much. It's been amazing. And Danny, the last question is, what would be your call to action? You have here people from public health, elected officials. We have some city councilors, advocates, media. What should they be doing? What can we do? Because it seems like it's not a time for people to become spectators. So what would be your call to action, regardless if people live in a city of 8 million people like New York, or if people live in a small community of 50,000, in a wealthy one, in a poor one? What is your call to action? What can we do? You have been so inspiring and showing so many examples. So tell us, how can each of us put a grain of sand so that collectively we change?
So, I mean, each of us is an advocate among our own community, whether it's around the dinner table or with our neighbors or at a community board meeting or, in elected office or in our pulpit writing. Each of us has an opportunity to help others reimagine what's possible. It is not fair to go into a community where most people have not seen or experienced anything else and to say, we want to do something revolutionary. What would you put here? We have to help guide people towards this promised land. And that's not only just renderings, but also maybe it's, as we've done, Gil, going to see other places, or in the case of New York, taking people to other neighborhoods. There's a huge opportunity of not just helping people to see what's possible, but helping them to connect to what it is that they will feel when they're in that place. What it means when my kids can ride a bike without fear, when my parents can age in place. These are all ideas that each of us have an opportunity to help move people towards. So in some cases, I think of all of our jobs as being advocate, preacher, therapist, marketer, etc. And so for each of us, we may fall into one place or the other, but we have to help to guide people what's possible. And I would just close with this, which is my kids love to draw pictures of cities, right? I mean, I guess it's family business, or they like to build Legos. But even though they know that I don't, I live in alternative transportation world, their instinct as 5-year-olds is to draw a street that has cars on it. As long as our kids are still thinking and programmed from the earliest ages of what a city should be, that will help to align the trajectory for the rest of a generation. So it's our job to help to reimagine, reshape. And I can't stress this enough, is that these things don't happen. They're not like manna from heaven. They don't fall. The city doesn't determine something. You have to fight. You have to have the stamina to fight, and you have to build big coalitions that are willing to stick with it for a long time. It took 50 years to get cars out of Central Park. That's not a year campaign. That's a generation campaign. So you have to go in with an understanding that some of these things will take longer than you. So who are you passing the baton? Who are you taking the baton from, and who will you be giving it to?
And Danny, 2 weeks ago, the guest was my brother, Enrique, and he asked the participants, he said, that a good city is where a child on a tricycle or any person on a wheelchair could get from anywhere to anywhere. And he said, would that child on a tricycle or the person on the wheelchair get anywhere in your neighborhood? It should be a very low-hanging fruit for any city. I mean, we're in 2024, we're developing all of this. I mean, we're the wealthiest cities that have ever existed. And nevertheless, a child on a tricycle cannot get to places. Danny, from the bottom of my heart, honestly, I thank you for your not only for this webinar, but for your last 5 years leading transportation alternatives. You have been amazing, and you have inspired not only the people of New York, but we have been seeing your advocacy and your campaigns around the world, and they have been an inspiration. I think that 20 by 20, 25 by 25, and many others have helped other advocacy groups. And we wish you the very, very best in whatever activities you do. And